it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. The Lord of the Feast. Endgame. Part 1. I don't know what it's like for other people, but I was finding that the more insanity I was exposed to, the quicker it rolled off me. Perhaps it's like developing an immunity to poison. Small doses over time allow you to withstand a lethal dose later. As such, I'd achieved a certain level of zen by the time Madison and I returned to Colby Hall with Laszlo and Theo in tow. Thoughts about talkative reapers and the blending, and something called the Lord, became just bits of information I was relaying to my comrades. The emotion behind the thoughts, the horror, had diminished to a distant anxiety for now. I knew it wouldn't last, but I relished my moment of inner calm just the same. Laszlo was still snapping Polaroids as I finished my debriefing, having flashed her camera over every inch of the interior. Theo had his focus on the entrance to the underground. He dropped a new glow stick down the hole and then looked my way, shaking his head. "Hector, you're the only guy I know who could charm a reaper into not eating you." "Yeah, especially one you shut up," commented Madison in a very distracted tone. She'd switched out her sniper rifle for an assault weapon and had taken position next to the rungs that led down into the hole. Her face wore a level of wariness I'd never seen before, her eyes never leaving the opening. I gave them a hard glare. "Oh, glad you two find this funny. You do realize this Reaper is the one that killed Abbott?" Theo's face showed me he hadn't forgotten that for one moment. "And trust me, Hector, I'd like nothing more than to finish what we started with that one." "Yeah, same here," said Laszlo, moving to join us while shaking a fistful of Polaroid pictures around absently. "I have some explosives with its name on it. Seriously, I paint the word Reaper on all my drone bombs now." "I took away someone we all cared about," Theo said. "But if this creature is willing to help us, we're going to have to put revenge to the side for now." I hadn't expected such pragmatism from Theo, not after his refusal to endorse my previous plan. He must have noticed my confusion. "Oh, I hate saying this, but Madison was right." He shook his head again. "The time for playing it safe is over." "Theo agreeing with me?" commented Madison. "Maybe it is the end of the world." She absently tossed a fourth stick down the manhole, even though the tunnel below was already covered in a lively green glow. "Here's another sobering thought," continued Madison. "I'm not sold on the idea that Reapers eat people's brains. It's never been confirmed, but if they do, and they get knowledge from the consumption, well, it makes sense that this Reaper would seek our team out, don't you think?" Laszlo's face scrunched up with uncertainty. "I've been arguing this point for over a year now. Does this mean you're going to admit that I'm right?" "Well, I'm admitting that it might explain this Reaper's behavior," said Madison. Laszlo seemed satisfied with this admission. She then moved my way and asked for the iPad. I was surprised she hadn't asked for it sooner. I suspected she wanted to savor it, make it her cherry on top of a forensic sundae. "Just don't erase anything," I teased. Laszlo stuck her tongue out at me, took hold of the iPad and started in. Madison's frown-heavy demeanor deepened as she watched Laszlo go to work. "If the Reaper wants Hector to give this device to our leadership, I'd say that's a solid reason not to." "What, you think it's rigged to explode?" I spoke. "I don't know what to think," Madison confessed. "But the fact that the Reaper didn't kill you doesn't mean it's on our side. We did just kill one of its own. For all we know, this is some type of asymmetrical warfare. This iPad could be a beacon for ML Death Squad." "I think it's mostly videos," said Laszlo, holding the pad up to us as a video played. A grim look materialized on her face. "Well, like this one." We watched silently as the video showed a scene of an old homestead out in the middle of nowhere. The camera holder had to be hiding in a bush or some tall grass, as vegetation occasionally clouded the picture. The shot was also a little on the shaky side, and something kept grunting at weird intervals, but the operator proved competent enough to keep the shot centered on the house. There was a truck parked next to it, and with a flash of alarm I recognized it as the vehicle the Betas had used to transport their prisoners. If that wasn't enough, I watched as several figures reluctantly filed out of the house toward the truck. It was the same people we'd rescued days ago, being escorted by the same bastards we'd killed. Before anyone had a chance to comment, Laszlo zipped her fingers to another file and played it. This one showed the battle at the cabbage farm. At first the fight was cast from a fair distance, Madison and I exchanging gunfire with the rogue SAS team while Laszlo's drone buzz-bombed the Humvee. Then a chorus of savage howls started up, drowning out the battlefield noise. The picture began to shake and swivel wildly as the camera holder grew distracted, perhaps excited. The final shot was the worst. A stampede of MLs sweeping by the camera, holding and snarling and thirsting for blood, while the camera operator reversed its grip so that the lens was facing it. If there was any doubt left as to who had been manning the iPad, the sight of those two black orbs front and center in the video dispelled it. Laszlo stopped the playback as we processed this newest bit of disquieting knowledge. So, they can make recordings now, said Theo, rubbing his head uneasily. Our Reaper turncoat can, at least, Laszlo offered. I think it was showing its work to us. That bastard is responsible for the farm debacle, Madison commented quietly, her eyes growing narrow. Theo asked Laszlo if there was more. She showed us a folder with several dozen video files in it. Our Reaper informant was quite the filmmaker. We could have spent the rest of the night looking through them, but I didn't think that would have been the best use of our time. I asked Laszlo if there was a way to figure out why the iPad was functioning inside the blind. She must have been waiting for someone to ask her that, because she went at the device like a starving lioness getting her fill of zebra, ripping off the protected cushioning and working off its back cover with the help of some tools from her tool wallet. I know we have multiple elephants in the room right now, I said, but we do have to say something to Tanaka. Do we? Countered Madison. When I gave her a "you've got to be kidding" stare, she let out an exasperated sigh. Yeah, I know. We need all the help we can get. Still, we'd be stupid to. Laszlo's shriek ended our conversation and sent us running to her side. Laszlo had laid bare the iPad's hardware on a nearby desk. Her tools were now scattered around the device as her hands covered her mouth. Her wide-eyed stare stuck on the grey thread-like substance crisscrossing the device's interior. I didn't think I had any more room in my soul for added shock, but those thin filaments found a way to get my skin to crawl once more. As the rest of us absorbed this newest development, Laszlo recovered enough to grab a mini screwdriver and tap it into a filament. There was no reaction. Laszlo did a few more light taps in other spots, but the alien material stayed inert. She frowned and looked at us, putting her hands on her hips and shaking her head. I don't think I'm reverse engineering this, she said. I think we should leave it alone for now. Well, I think we should burn it, said Madison. I think we're in over our heads, said Theo, motioning at Laszlo to hand over the prototype radio she had on her person. I think it's time to call in Tanaka. I didn't share my thoughts at that moment. I was desperately trying to push my dire musings away. Every time I thought I'd gained a working understanding of our enemy, the universe opted to throw more revelations into the mix, showing our enemy to be growing more talented and more powerful. I feared that we'd reach a point where the only rational conclusion was the one I desperately didn't want to believe, that we never really stood a chance. Tanaka didn't waste any time meeting with us. A scant 5 minutes had passed between Theo's brief radio conversation and the moment when Tanaka came through the door accompanied by 5 soldiers, 2 of whom looked like members of his consulting group. Madison tensed up as the soldiers fanned out inside the building. It was possible that Tanaka was merely adding security to our situation. After all, 2 Reapers from 2 different incidents had just shown us the vulnerabilities of our base camp. But the lack of any warm feelings from the good doctor, or any of his people, made me wonder exactly what kind of reception we were in for. Tanaka had a pistol strapped to his waist, a new addition from when I'd last seen him. He also wore a neutral expression, neither outwardly pleased nor angry. He walked up to the desk displaying the altered iPad and stared at it, coolly examined the grey cobweb structure infesting its circuitry. He moved to another desk and leaned against it, looking very tired at that moment. "So, tell me all of it," he said calmly. In the brief window between Theo's call and Tanaka's arrival, my team had discussed our strategy. In the end, we agreed to one course of action. Let Theo do the talking. Theo moved to stand before Tanaka and did just that. "I'll tell you all of it, but you have to do it first." "That is not how it works, Mr. Stockman," countered Tanaka. "You don't get to lecture us about how things work," Theo dared to say, his eyes narrowing. "We're a long way from chains of command and disciplinary hearings. We're all we have, Doctor. My team will fight and die to protect everyone here, but we need to know everything you know." I expected Tanaka to issue a rebuttal or a threat. A lot of leaders resort to such tactics when challenged by their subordinates. Tanaka went silent, looking down at the floor as if contemplating his options, then gave Theo a resigned look that suggested that he was too fatigued or too despondent to put up a power struggle. "I already told you that this base's history is irrelevant," he said. Theo pointed at the room housing the underground opening. "There's a sublevel to this base. I say that's relevant, especially since there's no mention of that in the file you gave us." Tanaka quickly told his bodyguards to wait outside. Like good soldiers, they quickly filed out. He then turned his attention back to us. "Right, what I tell you doesn't leave this room, understand? I will pursue action if it does."
"We're wranglers, Tanaka," said Madison. "We know how to keep secrets."
Tanaka nodded. It was true, after all.
"The file I gave you is accurate, at least until 1979.
Theo crossed his arms and smirked. "They reopened the base. Why?" Tanaka made a rueful laugh.
"There's another fact that the file doesn't state. Sylvester Cobley committed suicide 1 month before the base was due to close. And we're not talking about your normal suicide. He was found in one of the barracks having used a kitchen knife to blind and deafen himself. He was somehow incredibly quiet about it, and subsequently bled out before a medic got to him."
I let out a gasp. What would make someone end their life so painfully?
"A short investigation was conducted, the results classified and the matter buried," continued Tanaka. "Officially, Colby killed himself over his despondency related to this project's failure."
"Unofficially?" Theo asked, and Tanaka shrugged.
"I only have so much clout in the military. The brass who keeps this place's secrets told me enough to help me steer our operation away from embarrassing truths. I did manage to get hold of some of Colby's medical records, though. He had been suffering increased anxiety a year before he died, enough so that he started seeing a psychiatrist. One medical report stated that Colby had been talking about the things he couldn't unsee. Colby might have been discredited in public, but his own notes and reports were classified. He also wasn't the only one to feel unnerved by the time spent at the base. There were other medical reports by staff members who felt uneasy, unable to sleep, constantly on edge." "So, what made the government reopen the base and build an underground sub-level 20 years after Colby's death?" asked Madison. "Again, my bosses didn't share much," said Tanaka. "What I could piece together is that it was an effort to follow up on Colby's work. Moreover, the idea of wormholes as a real concept was gaining traction. The sub-level was created to house a new testing chamber for Thin Point experiment. It was hypothesized that the reason Colby didn't succeed in his efforts is because his alleged Thin Point was underground and that direct access was needed. Please don't ask me to explain any of their logic. I think it is all idiocy, made worse by how it all ended."
"Did someone else die?" I asked.
7 someones, Tanaka corrected. Less than a year after the base went back online, there was an accident in the underground testing chamber. Some kind of system malfunction caused 7 lab workers to get trapped in the chamber. They died by suffocation, and after that the base was closed again. All the entrances to the sublevel were sealed. And this is why I chose not to tell you. There was no easy way for the MLs to gain access to the sublevel, and even less reason for them to do so. There are no humans to snack on down there, and MLs are roamers, not hiders. And yet here's an entrance, said Madison, pointing at the hole. And I'm pretty damn sure at least some of them are down there. Your story has a lot of holes in it, Dr. Tanaka, said Theo. Are you sure about any of this? No, I'm not, Tanaka admitted. Certainly not now. But I've told you what I know, certainly more than the brass wanted you to know. And now it's your turn to talk, and I want to know everything.
It was my turn to step up, and I didn't hold anything back. Tanaka wasn't going to be someone I sent Christmas cards to, but I did believe he wanted the ML threat ended as much as we did. Tanaka's disclosure of the base's sordid history had convinced me that keeping further secrets was only going to get more people killed. You'd think this would be a lesson we didn't have to learn over and over. After all, if the government had come clean about the MLs decades ago, our situation might not have gotten this bad. But it does seem that the knee-jerk human reaction to the negative is to hide it, suppress it, deny it, and then hope you're dead before the truth comes out. Well, most people are never that lucky. Tanaka took in all my revelations with his usual thoughtful aplomb, though his slight frown suggested that he was not thrilled. He'd taken hold of the subverted iPad during my spiel and had fiddled with it at times, seemingly ignoring our advice about not using it. After I finished, he stared for a time at the grey semi-organic mess on the back of the device before speaking, as if looking for answers within that alien gunk.
Laszlo, can you put this device back together?
He asked. Laszlo looked at the iPad with something like quiet disgust, and then shrugged. Shouldn't be a problem. No idea how it's functioning in the blind. Hell, it shouldn't even have power. The battery section's chugged with the stuff.
Understanding it isn't the priority right now, replied Tanaka. This device is our sole link to the one creature willing to work with us, and we need to use it. Theo, I don't have a map of the sublevel, but I do know where the cargo entrance is, and that might be accessible from within. If we can get that open, we can move weapons and our gear inside while we scout it out.
Theo frowned as he sussed out Tanaka's intentions.
You want my team to go down there and explore further, I take it? Your team obviously knows what it's doing, said Tanaka, even when you're clearly disobeying orders. I'll send Delta Team with you, but that's all I can afford to send right now. I need the rest for the camp.
Why not send everyone? Said Madison, looking extremely uncomfortable all of a sudden. Madison was a less is more type when it came to people, so for her to want more people on an operation made me wonder what was really eating at her. Tanaka's answer was to pull out a handful of Polaroid photos from his jacket and hand them to Theo.
I was going to tell you all this earlier, but I needed to know what you had encountered first. These pictures were taken by Epsilon Team roughly 30 minutes ago. I had sent them back on the service road so they could get clear of the blind and radio in a report. I was hoping to get some reinforcements, but approximately half a mile from the blind perimeter, they encountered this. They were nice enough to get pictures before they gunned their Humvee all the way back here.
Theo handed the photos to me, cursing under his breath as he did so. A quick look at the pictures made me do the same. In the headlights of the Humvee was a horde of MLs, clustering on the road and the surrounding woods. Definitely dozens, probably hundreds. One picture showed them charging the camera holder, so they were clearly aware of us.
Something that your Reaper said about little time and us being known and brethren coming, said Tanaka. Now it makes sense. I don't know how honest your Reaper pal is being, but because either it or the other one tipped off the rest. Based on how fast MLs travel, I estimate that this pack could reach us within the hour. We came prepared to fight off a large pack, but we must assume other packs are incoming, not to mention other Reapers. There are no other roads out, and we all know that we can't outrun the MLs on foot. There might be something down in the sublevel, or there may not be. But that sublevel is the best defendable location on this base. We may need it. May need it, Laszlo blurted out, glumly shaking her head. With our luck, we're gonna need it. Laszlo wasn't going with us this time, as we all agreed that she had a more valuable role to play. She needed to sift through the video data given to us by the Reaper, ideally to give us an idea of what we were up against. Trekking blindly through abandoned tunnels potentially full of voracious monsters was more my kind of job. I did get the privilege of wearing one of the prototype radios, so there was that. With time at a premium, we geared up and prepared to descend into the vacant sub-level with barely a plan to speak of. We'd start with finding the cargo access room, where there was certain to be a larger door to the service. Getting the door open would require either manual effort or electrical power. We'd cross that bridge when we got to it. The 4 fresh faces that composed Delta Team awaited us at the manhole entrance, none of them volunteering to go first. Madison made to take the plunge, then hesitated at the opening as if a case of cold feet had suddenly hit her. She pulled a flashball and tossed it down, filling the darkness below with steady pulses of cobalt light. A smart move, I thought, but when she didn't proceed downwards, I again considered what else was going on. Theo eventually walked up to her, put a hand on her shoulder in that reassuring way comrades in the know do for their friends, and then made his way down the rungs. I went second, mostly because I wanted to get the moment over with. A basement sub-level was just an oversized survival shelter to me, so you can imagine how little I wanted to go down. But circumstances required me to be brave, and so I climbed down. The world faded to a flashing series of ill-defined images as I reached the bottom, then grew focused again as Theo tossed the active flashball down the tunnel, allowing our flashlights and glow sticks to consistently illuminate the surroundings. We'd entered a downward curving tunnel that felt more like an escape route than the entrance to our science lab. Deactivated lights and tiny vents dotted the walls, but I couldn't make out any side doors or rooms. The chill air did nothing for my nerves, but at least there weren't any easy ambush spots for our foes. Madison finally came down, looking far more clenched up than usual. She walked past me without a word and took point as the Delta Team members climbed down. I really wanted to ask Madison what was going on with her at this point, but it was an understandably bad time for caring and sharing. I still trusted her, but I found myself keeping one eye on her as we proceeded down the tunnel. I blame Hollywood for implanting notions that we'd be running into booby traps or a bottomless chasm or a rush of rabid MLs. But not only was our initial foray trouble-free, we hit a room within the first minute. A metal door stood ajar, its lock and handle bent as if yanked open by something extraordinarily strong. 3 guesses as to what caused that. The dark place before us reminded me of another large warehouse, but this one was far more cluttered than the one above us. The ceiling was now a good 20 feet up, dust motes doing ballet in our light beams. The cruelties of time had led to collapsed shelving and broken crates, creating a wreckage maze that blocked much of the room from easy view. Garbage aside, it was hard not to be impressed with the size of the underground facility. Someone clearly believed in Sylvester Colby's theories enough to throw plenty of resources into building this sublevel. But what had the MLs seen in the place? We followed Madison as she deftly maneuvered us through the maze. As we climbed over the remains of several crates, I noticed the prevalence of ragged claw marks on most of the material. Typical ML behavior was to wreck human furnishings when they could, so there was no doubt now that the MLs had been here. We finally came across the first of our objectives, a cement ramp leading up to a sizable steel door. It had been obscured from our view by an orgy of discarded equipment and packaging, as if the previous staff had been told to seal up the sublevel in the middle of moving out. Despite being peppered with a smattering of shallow claw marks and dents, it seemed reassuringly impenetrable, but now we needed it penetrated. One Delta Team member had an engineering background, so Theo ordered Delta Team to stay at the entrance, see if they could find a way to manually open the door and clear a path for incoming equipment. Our team would finish exploring the room. Or maybe we should hold off on our further exploration until we get the main door open,
I suggested to Theo once we were outside of easy earshot from Delta Team.
We can't have the rest of the task force come into an unsecured area, Theo replied.
Isn't the blind technically an unsecured area? Well, Theo let out an exasperated sigh.
What do you want from me, Hector?
You want me to be the cautious leader or the gung-ho type? We have to take some chances. Yes, some chances, but this place is too big for the three of us to search effectively. I felt my caution was warranted. I still couldn't make out the rest of the shadowed room through the labyrinth of shelving and storage. I couldn't even tell if there was another exit.
Right, we'll start with securing the route between here and the tunnel to Colby Hall.
We'll set up an easy path to follow. Sound safe enough to you? I couldn't help noticing Theo's acerbic tone. I figured he was less worried about us and more concerned with leaving Laszlo behind, under the protection of Dr. Tanaka's untested leadership. Since there wasn't much either of us could do about it, I let my mind wander to a distracting question. So, what is that tunnel to Colby Hall anyway? I asked, more or less rhetorically. Some kind of fire exit?
Probably, said Theo. Smart people don't typically build sublevels with only one entrance.
Yeah, but why does it lead into a building and not outside? Containment? Secrecy? Theo glared at me.
I was supposed to guess at the mindset of a bunch of freaky scientists from decades ago.
Suddenly regretting this line of thinking, I also finally realized Madison hadn't joined in the conversation. Instead, she was anxiously staring at the steel door with the kind of look that a psychic made to will a door open. I was now concerned enough about her atypical consternation that I asked Theo for a quick aside before we kept going. We found a spot further away from her, and I quietly asked if he'd noticed Madison's behavior.
This is Madison, Hector, he stated. She's got more steel than blood in her. She'll be all right.
Well, she's distracted, Theo, I countered. We've been surrounded by dozens of man-eating monsters on 2 separate occasions, and I've never seen her as disturbed as I see her right now. What do you know? I could see the indecision in his eyes. He clearly knew something about Madison, but then he shook his head, denying an explanation.
It's my job to know her history, Hector, but it's not my place to tell you, not unless it becomes an issue.
Let's just focus on... But I missed the rest of his statement as Laszlo's voice cut in, making me jump. Tanaka's asking for a sit-rep, Hector, she said, and I have news of my own. I gave her a quick update, and she did the same. Hers was more interesting. We found the external cargo entrance into the sublevel. Some clever dick thought to build a tool shed over it and call it a day. Tanaka thinks he can demolish the shed and get the door partially clear within 2 hours. Then we can rig a generator to open the door from the outside. We're also fortifying the building I'm in, just in case we have to defend it while the task force evacuates underground. Oh, and if you hear a big boom, that's just the shed exploding. Tanaka brought dynamite. He brought dynamite? I replied. Seems a little Looney Tunes, right? She said, but it makes sense. We can't exactly trust remote detonators. But don't worry, it's military dynamite, meaning it's free of nitroglycerin. More stable that way. Well, I wasn't reassured, but I did hold my tongue. I signed off and rubbed the back of my sore neck as I relayed Laszlo's information to Theo. Well, my stress was understandable, but it also felt like the constant drone in my head was intensifying. Theo's grimace suggested he was back to his unease over Laszlo, and I couldn't resist an attempt at reassurance. Laszlo's safe right now, I said. Safer than we are, probably. He gave me a questioning look.
Oh, don't give me hallmark cliches, Hector. Let's just get back to...
He then looked around in confusion.
Madison.
I searched the immediate area. Delta Team was still dealing with the door, but Madison had disappeared on us.
Oh, shit, Theo muttered. Not the time, Mads.
After a few minutes of searching, Theo found a path in the crate maze opposite our position and concluded that Madison had most likely used it. While not a smart move to spread ourselves out further, we needed to find Madison before her recklessness got her killed. The two of us hurried through the gap and into the rest of the debris maze, sacrificing caution for speed. I called out her name once, my words reverberating creepily through the dark facility. Then Theo hushed me, reminding me that we were in enemy territory and shouldn't be announcing our presence if possible. Our pursuit came to an end when the maze abruptly gave way to a cleared section near the far side of the chamber. My carbine rose to the ready as I took in the ominous scene before me. Much effort had been spent by parties unknown to pile up debris against the nearby walls, creating a clearing devoted to a brand new form of Meat Locust machination. The space contained dozens of small figures frozen in positions of submission around piles of broken, calcified material. We stepped around stone-like figures of MLs in various states of disrepair, their hardened bodies surrounded by growing piles of dust, as bits of them broke off and dissolved. This was a Reaper birthing site, a massive one, and I counted at least 9 separate birthing rituals. If I'd been a more naive scientific type, I might have thought this was a gold mine. ML tissue, live or dead, was virtually impossible to come by, but these ML corpses had become something more mineral than biological, and little had been learned through the study of the samples Team Abbott had acquired all those months ago. Our enemy's biology worked on a different level, a level beyond our understanding, and this orgy of ML debris only served to taunt our ignorance. One figure in the mess proved human. Madison stood in the middle of the clearing, ignoring me and Theo as we called her name and approached. Her rifle-mounted flashlight aimed toward the wall to our right, the beam projecting into another tunnel leading out of the chamber. This tunnel was far larger than the previous one, able to fit motor vehicles if needed. I noticed a metal rail track built into the floor, the starting point only a few feet away from my position, the rest of it disappearing into the tunnel's gloom. I wagered it was a cargo tunnel, used for shuttling equipment from this room to the actual laboratories. I walked up to Madison cautiously, scanning her for distress or injury. She looked physically okay, no signs of blood, but she was acting like an army of locusts were about to come charging out of the cargo tunnel. Well, for all I knew, she might be right. "Madison, why didn't you wait for us?" I asked. "Oh, I can't think in here," she said softly, her eyes remaining focused on the tunnel. "I needed to get on with it." "Yeah, do I need to send you topside?" said Theo. "You know you can't go hunting on your own." "Don't bench me now, Theo," she said. "Hey, you're not okay, Madison," I replied gently. "Look at your feet, Hector," she calmly stated. "Look at the floor all around you." I didn't think Madison was in a rational frame of mind at the moment, yet I couldn't help but do as she asked. My flashlight touched on the concrete floor below me, showing up a thin level of dirt coating it. Not dirt, though. No, it was the same color and consistency of the ML corpse dust, and some of it was in thick chunks that crunched underfoot, like dried mud that flaked off the treads of boots. There was quite a lot of it. Some spots were 2 or 3 inches deep in places. I expanded my search and realized that the 3 of us were standing in the center of a huge, circular pile of detritus. "Something else was made here," Madison explained in a haunted tone. "Now follow my light." She pointed a beam at a spot on the edge of the substance circle. Inhuman footprints could be seen on the concrete heading away, a torrent of them. On the edges, the prints were the familiar 3-toed form of an ML. A few were larger than the others, suggesting that Reapers were among their number. But the center of the stampede was a chaotic mishmash of shapes, some like twisted handprints, others like that of a floppy appendage dragging on the ground. Some large and malformed entity had half-walked, half-dragged itself through the dust pile, leaving behind a thick trail that faded into the cargo tunnel. Judging from the width of the trail, it was around 15 feet wide. A creeping dread found me and dug in, and the word Lord came to mind, and I considered the possibility that the newest creation was that very thing. I found myself staring into the tunnel, wishing I had a ton of dynamite right then. I'd have sealed the cargo tunnel entrance,
and lived out the rest of my time on the planet ignorant of the full horror that we were fighting. Thank God for Theo, though. He interrupted my escalating terror by throwing out the observation that these tracks looked several days old. For whatever reason, he had his mind firmly on working the problem, not understanding its implications. Madison seemed to respond to his words by taking her eyes off the tunnel and looking around the scene. She then agreed. All this had occurred at least a week ago. Well, that snapped me out of my panic because our Reaper ally had said the Lord was something still to come. Whatever had been born here wasn't the Locust Endgame, at least not yet. Stuck in a dark, unexplored facility, with a pack of MLs hiding about, a horde of MLs approaching, no rescue coming, and still no answers to my growing list of questions, I took what little hope I could. Sometimes a little hope is all you need to keep moving. Well, my dear friends, I was hoping to get this, the final section of the story, all done and dusted in one long video. It's going to be out 2.5, 3 hours long, and I just haven't had time, really haven't. So there's going to be probably 2 more videos after this. We're heading towards the end, definitely. Endgame, the title, should have given that away. But yeah, it's coming along in the next couple of Sundays, alright? So, yep, did want a massive long video for you all, but it's not going to happen just at the moment. But I will be back with something else tomorrow night. Till then, my dear friends, hope you continue enjoying this story. Very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.